Hello and welcome to Mr. Seagull's History by Numbers. So, it's Thursday. It's a bit later than normal, 11:15, because I was doing something for BBC Bite Size about maths. But welcome, and today we're going to be travelling back to the 1940s. We're going to be looking at a very important historical figure in British and world history, Winston Churchill. So thank you so much for joining us. And before we get into the class, I'll outline the session for today. And so hello to people on Instagram, hello on Twitter, hello on Facebook. Hopefully I'll get the comments coming through. It's a bit later than normal, so I'll let people slowly enter the class. Okay. So again, last night I had a fabulous football session, which is why I'm wearing a West Ham. Although West Ham did win the World Cup in 1966, so if I'm being patriotic, that's why I'm wearing a West Ham top. On Saturday, we have our family quiz at 8 o'clock, so hopefully I'll see you for that session. So, firstly, I'd like to thank people for homework. So welcome to the Roberts, welcome to Sarah Johnson. So again, fabulous homework this week, again, as usual. Oscar with the great picture of South Africa. Then we had Karina with, the Vosho dance. Boop, boop, yep. That was brilliant. And then we also had Hayden and Lisa drawing some of the key lessons from our class, and also almost like the mystery 5, the 5 big game animals. I'm trying to get my Instagram to work so I can see who's on the live as well. So thank you for the homework. Again, if you enjoy the classes, hello Little Deacon, do send in through the homework so we can share it with everyone else. So thank you for that. And welcome to Mayuri, just joining in. So today's class is looking at someone that's a very important figure. So Winston Churchill, when I was in primary school, I actually did a speech on him as one of my heroes. And as I've grown up, I realised, like history, things are much more complicated, but he's really important to study someone as important in British history. So we're going to look at Churchill's childhood, him growing up, what he did before World War II. Then we'll look at how he became Prime Minister and his importance to the country there in terms of speeches and inspiration and setting the tone. And then a bit of fun. We're going to, today's dance honestly is too energetic. If you've not got the energy today, leave now, because it's going to be a very energetic dance. Then we're going to look at Churchill's VE Day speech. And then finally the legacy, the pros and the cons of it. And then as usual, we'll have our homework come through. Then a quiz with Bobby, make sure you are paying attention. And then finally, thoughts on Mr. Seagull, ways in which you can reflect positively about the classes. Okay, hello to Edward and Ola, hello Mayuri, hello Manchester, welcome, thank you all for joining. So we're going to, what we normally do, we're going to travel back in time, but to do that, we're going to have to borrow our Back to the Future car. I've got my glasses. We always, on Thursday, we're travelling back in time, boys and girls. I've got my Marty McFly jacket. How's that jacket? I've got it. Are you ready? Are you ready to go back to the 1940s with me, yeah? Okay, I'm going to get the car in. Oh, let's get the gear in. Gear 1, gear 2, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 88 miles an hour. And we're now in the 1940s. Welcome. My phone doesn't seem to work in the 1940s, but that's what you'd expect because there's no phone reception here. So welcome to the 1940s. How are we all? So, we've travelled back in time to look at an important period in world history. So World War II, we know, started in 1939, ended in 1945. And we want to try and understand one of the most important figures in that period, Winston Churchill. Before I do that, I want to have a quick read of, so I've got Encyclopedia Britannica. This is an old edition, but the facts are still all good. Apart from a few science things which have changed since then. So I'll read you what the introduction is. So it says, Sir Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill was a great British statesman, public speaker and wartime leader who saw his country through its most threatening days of World War II. In the summer of 1940, when Britain was in danger of being invaded by the armies of Nazi Germany, it was to Winston Churchill the nation, and indeed the whole of the Commonwealth, looked for leadership. So Winston Churchill was someone that the nation looked to for leadership. Okay, but let's find out what this man was made of. Hello, Emma L. Bell, welcome. Yeah, the DeLorean. We've travelled. Lisa's saying we've got a DeLorean. We've already travelled. We've travelled back 75 years plus. Okay. So, Winston Churchill was born in 1874 in Blenheim Palace. And Blenheim Palace, if you ever get the chance to go, it is a place that you can visit. It's a beautiful residential palace, I guess, in Oxfordshire. And it was built actually for John Churchill, I think Duke of Marlborough, one of Churchill's great-great-grandfathers, as a thank you for war victories. And when Churchill was born, he was born to his parents, which would make sense, Lady and Lord Randolph Churchill. But Churchill was half American. So his mother was American. Actually, later on, much later on, in 1963, do you know Churchill became the first person to be made an honorary American citizen? That's a first. Churchill did many things, but he became the first person to be made an honorary American citizen. So Churchill, what was he like as a child growing up? Well, to be honest, he wasn't the best academic in school. He was struggling with a lot of subjects. But the things that he did enjoy were history and English composition. And you can probably tell he obviously understands history as being a big leader, and English composition, his speeches were on point. And how did he end up becoming Prime Minister? Let's have a look. How did he end up being Prime Minister? So actually, he became an MP in 1900 for Oldham, at about the age of 25, 26. And one of the things about him is that he travelled extensively in the 1880s, 90s. Around when he was growing up, he travelled a lot. So he ended up going to Cuba, Afghanistan, Egypt, South Africa. So this gave him a worldly sense of what was happening with the British Empire back then. But also, he was involved in something very cool. So there was a letter in 1917 sent to Churchill, and this is awesome. Have you ever used the letters OMG in a text? Like you might go, OMG, Mr. Seagull's haircut's on point. OMG, oh my gosh, oh my god. Well, Churchill was the first person to have received that in a letter in 1917. And that's quite cool, isn't it? So the first person ever, OMG. But Churchill, so we know him as the wartime leader from 1940 to 1945. At one stage, he became head of the Royal Navy, as we can see the picture there. But actually, he served as a parliamentarian politician for such a long period. So he served in various capacities under 6 different monarchs. Victoria, Edward VII, George V, Edward VIII, George VI, and Elizabeth II. So all of these people, all these monarchs, Churchill served under some capacity. But the person that we know him mostly is as Prime Minister during World War II. So let's now go into World War II. So, this man here, holding a piece of paper, is Neville Chamberlain. And Neville Chamberlain was the Prime Minister before Churchill. And he'd come back to Britain from Munich saying, I've secured peace in our time. We all know, ultimately, that peace was fragile. And Germany invaded Poland and set off World War II. So Chamberlain, in 1940, was forced to step down, forced to resign. And then people looked towards Churchill. He led a coalition of people, and became our Prime Minister in 1940. And one of the things, again, I'll refer back to this, because one of the things that we know Churchill for is his speech-making abilities. That's what, again, when I did my presentation in primary school, one of the things I talked about was Churchill's speech quality was honestly one of the most inspirational orators that we've ever seen. So it says here, when he was Prime Minister, his determination inspired the British people, even during the darkest and most difficult days of 1940 to 41. And some of his speeches are probably the most remembered things to this day. So I'm going to be playing a little clip from his We Shall Never Surrender speech. So have a listen to this. And this is during the very tough days in the early 1940s. Have a watch of his speech here.
We shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
So you can see his speeches to the nation, sometimes to Parliament, to the nation, were there to inspire people because it was a very challenging period. World War II, early on, Nazi Germany were looking like they could sweep through all of Europe. So without Churchill's words, I think a lot of people in Britain would have given up hope. Okay, so we're about halfway through. I think it's time for a little dance. So obviously World War II was a difficult period, but in this time, lots of dances, just around the 30s and 40s, dances came about. So let's look at a couple of the, again, we always try to have a bit of fun in Mr. Seagull's classes. So there are things like the jive, the jitterbug, swing, and the swing came from America in the 1930s. And there's even Lindy Hop. Has anyone heard of Lindy Hop? I'll write it down for you, Lindy Hop. Lindy Hop, Lindy. And if you ever heard of Lindy Hop, it's a style that they sometimes use in Strictly. It comes from Charles Lindbergh. Charles Lindbergh was named after him, and he was the first person in 1927 to make a flight successfully across the Atlantic. So Charles Lindbergh, Lindy Hop. There you go. That's a little quiz fact. So we're gonna get involved with a little bit of dance. I'm gonna get my outfit ready. Hello, Liz. Liz is joining us. Got my little hat. And this dance is very energetic. Honestly, I don't know what I'm gonna be doing. I'm gonna be kicking my feet, swinging around. But it's a dance from the 1940s, and again, I think in difficult times, dance can be a way of expressing your humanity. Because war's not a pretty thing, but dancing can be a way of expressing our humanity. So have a look and get ready. We're going to do this twice over, and I'm going to be exhausted. I'm sweating already. Let's have a look at the dance now. Come on. Oh no, you're not flipping over. Oh my god. I feel like I need a partner. Come on, you can be my virtual partner. We'll do this one more time. So you can see the dances then. We had the jive, the jitterbug, swing, Lindy Hop. Dancing there, if I could go back in time to dancing, it would be this period of 30s and 40s. If I would do Strictly, I'm so going to do this. So Lindy Hop, remember? Lindy Hop came from Charles Lindbergh, named after him. The first person to cross the Atlantic. There we go. Oh my god. I'm exhausted. Who convinced me to do a 1940s style dance for you guys? I don't know. I feel like I don't need to do Joe Wicks today. I've done a mixture of jive, jitterbug, swing, and Lindy Hop. Whew, that was exhausting. Okay, let's continue proceeding on. So, again, we'll have another lesson at some stage looking at World War II itself, but today's looking at Churchill, his speeches and how it inspired people, and some of his legacy. So, recently, on the 8th of May, you would have heard or seen on television, we had the 75th anniversary commemorations for VE Day. So that's Victory in Europe. So it didn't mean that the war was completely over. Japan in the east was still there, and obviously we had, I think in early August, Americans did drop the first ever nuclear bombs on people, and that ended World War II sort of officially. But by the 8th of May, that was victory and Europe. So Churchill gave a speech, we're going to listen to in a second, about saying how we finally overcome the enemy. But interestingly, if anyone's ever watched The King's Speech, has anyone ever seen that? The film with Colin Firth. And if you want a great film with a historical context but really moving words and acting, The King's Speech with Colin Firth in it, shows George VI, how he developed from not being a conference speaker to being able to address the nation. And King George VI also addressed the nation after Churchill did. So let's have a listen to what Churchill said on VE Day. Let's have a listen to his speech. Again, he's renowned for quite a few speeches. The ones that I think are the most iconic are, so we've got obviously the Never Surrender speech. We also have the blood, toil, tears and sweat. So again, there are speeches where he would try to cajole us and say, we can do it. And the speeches at the end where he sort of said, yes, we've made it. Let's have a listen to this speech now.
We shall go on to...
We've seen that one before.
After gallant France had been struck down, we from this island and from our united empire maintained the struggle single-handed for a whole year, until we were joined by the military might of Soviet Russia and later by the overwhelming power and resources of the United States of America. Finally, almost the whole world was combined against the evildoers, who are now prostrate before us. Our gratitude to our splendid allies goes forth from all our hearts.
So there, he talked about victory, so VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, and then Mayuri on Facebook saying we had VJ Day, which meant victory in Japan. And Churchill acknowledged the importance of our allies. And he was saying that from 1941 to 45, he tried to build up what he called the Grand Alliance between Britain, the United States, and the USSR. So USSR is the Union of Socialist Soviet Republics. And we did Russia last week, and essentially it's the older version of Russia, but not quite. And what Churchill did was, during World War II, he would travel to Washington, Moscow, and he met President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, so FDR, and Joseph Stalin from the USSR. And he became particularly good terms with President Roosevelt, and that led to good relationships between Britain and America, which in some ways reflects Britain's, what people call the special relationship with the Americans. But Churchill, so after World War II, so pretty much before the end, before I think in August, he was still deposed. He lost an election and Labour came back into power. So let's have a look at his legacy, and this is more complicated. So Churchill actually became Prime Minister one more time from 1951 to 55. So he had a second term. So you know when I said he served Queen Elizabeth II? Queen Elizabeth's been around forever. So he served her from the latter half of his second time as Prime Minister. And I know some people will be excited to hear this. Churchill actually got into painting in a big way. So from the 40s and 50s, he did lots of paintings. I know Lisa will be very happy, Oscar, because Churchill loved his painting. Churchill actually, this is a great fact, he won a Nobel Prize. But not in peace, as you might think a war leader wins perhaps a peace prize for ending Nazi advance in Europe and the world. But he won it in 1953 for literature, for writing. And he'd written many things, obviously speeches, but he also wrote a book called The History of the English-Speaking Peoples. A book in 4 volumes, which looked at Britain, the empires and English-speaking peoples from 55 BC. 55 BC, let me write this down. From 55 BC, and that's from when Caesar invaded Britain, to 1902. The Second Boer War in South Africa. So literature, Nobel Prize is what actually he won. So Churchill, he died in 1965. And remember a couple of years before that, in 1963, he was given an honorary citizenship of America. And partly that was because he built up a really good relationship with Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the president in that time. But when he died, of course, there was a national mourning, commemoration, celebrations. It's interesting trying to find the right word, but people obviously acknowledged he was important because we had a state funeral for him. And rightly, he's acknowledged as a hero, someone that helped Britain. In fact, without him, who knows, we talk about counterfactual histories. Without Churchill's sort of rhetoric, strong motivational words, and resolve, we might have had a very different outcome to World War II. But the one thing that happened straight after World War not after 1965. Do you know Winston Churchill entered the charts there's something called the voice of Winston Churchill. And he's to this day the only Prime Minister to have a chart entry. Imagine that, you're playing a Spotify Top of the Pops and then you hear Winston Churchill's speeches, but it made it there. Okay, so Churchill, he's a hero of mine. I studied about him at primary school, I did my speech there, but we do need to acknowledge that he wasn't perfect. And people have accused him of racism. So there was one famous case in the 1940s, I think 1943, there was a famine in Bengal, and he sort of diverted resources away from Bengal and India, and 2 or 3 million people died of starvation. But what we do need to sort of acknowledge that historical figures, they can be heroes, we can put them on plinths, but they're complex, they have flaws. There are no people that are perfect, and Churchill is an example of that. But we still have to acknowledge the importance of the work he did in World War II. So again, this is an area where there's lots of information out there, but I want to sort of get you thinking about how we can evaluate historical figures. Okay, I think it's time for a quiz. Are you ready? Are you ready for your quiz? Are you ready? Okay, before that, homework. So you've got 3 options. Like the Martin Luther King, a great orator, you could write a speech for Churchill. So you could do your own victory speech. Write a short speech, and I know Hayden did one for Martin Luther King. Or he did a poem, I think. The second one is drawing something. Could be up to 3 things. It could be like Lisa or Oscar. Or finally, send me a dance. And honestly, I'm absolutely sweating here. I'm sweating here. You can come along, take a picture of your dance. I know Karine does. I know Francesca does that. Do your dance. Okay, are you ready for your test today? Are you ready for your test? Okay, here we go. Your 3 questions. Where was Churchill born? I'm going to see if I can get instant. Where was Churchill born? Question number 1. Question number 2. Who did Churchill succeed as Prime Minister? Who did Churchill succeed as Prime Minister? And then question number 3. What did Churchill win the Nobel Prize for? So let's have a look. So any answers coming through? Let me check answers coming through. So hello, Millie on Instagram. Let's have a look. Any answers coming through? So question 1. Where was Churchill born? Remember I said this? It was given to the Duke of Marlborough and became something for his family. In the 1720s it was built. It was Blenheim Palace. Well done. I can see Oscar's got the right answer. And a few of you typed them as well. So Blenheim Palace. Okay. Question number 2 was, who did he succeed as Prime Minister? So this question, I should have a bit of clarification in World War II. Because he obviously became Prime Minister again in 1951. So I got a couple of answers. Hayden's got some answers. So has Liz. So has Sarah. And the answer is Chamberlain. So in World War II, so the question should have clarified, World War II succeeded Chamberlain. And the last one, if you ask most people out there on the street, they'll think he must have won it for peace. But he didn't, did he? And we know that the Roberts got it correct, so has Oscar, so has Mayuri, so has Sarah. The answer is literature. Again, he wrote something called The History of the English-Speaking Peoples. So there we go. That's our class. That's our main part of our class. Let's proceed. Thank you. Well done. Well done for your answers. So, again, we'll do the thoughts of Mrs. Seagull. So take a deep breath. Let's have a look. Okay, we're back in business. Take a deep breath. Well done, Karina. Full marks there. So we're going to look at our thoughts. So let's take a few deep breaths. Take a deep breath in for 3. 1, 2, 3. Hold it at the bottom of your lungs and breathe it back out. Well done, Martha, as well. Breathe in. Hold it for 2. And breathe back out. Okay, so the quote I have for you today is, the difference between the impossible and the possible lies in a person's determination. So, this quote is particularly important because of Churchill. So again, in World War II, we saw that the Germans, after 1919, the Versailles Treaty, they were told no more armaments, you had to sort of demilitarize, and they felt aggrieved. And they built up their armed forces secretly under the Nazi Party. And when World War II happened, they were a strong military force, perhaps the strongest the world had ever seen. So for Britain to lead the charge against that seemed an impossible situation because Germany had swept through Poland, France, Belgium. Europe was under Nazi occupation, Western Europe. But Churchill, he was determined. And of course, we're not all going to be Churchill. We're not going to be delivering speeches. But in your own lives, where there are times where things seem difficult, it could be your exams, it could be your personal life, it could be looking at your bills, whatever it is, and thinking, oh, this is really difficult. And life is difficult. But the key thing is being determined, where you say, I'm not going to give in. So in the same way in which Churchill says, never surrender, you should have that attitude towards your own life. There'll be times in life where things are very difficult. But if you can be determined, you won't always succeed, but you give yourself the best possible chance of overcoming difficulties. There we go. Okay. So, bit of Monkford and Seagull before we leave, because it's still on television, it's still on iPlayer. If you've not watched it, what are you doing? What are you doing? You should be watching Bobby Seagull. So, it's still on iPlayer, and I want to show you another scene. And actually this relates to looking at Churchill and trying to evaluate him as a historical figure. So let's have a look at this scene here. Are you ready? Let's have a look. Let's have a look at the scene, Sue. Let's get this up here.
For centuries, many believed there were just 4 elements: earth, water, air, and fire. The 4 elements theory was first refuted in the 17th century. But by the time Priestley was tinkering in his laboratory, it was being thoroughly and unequivocally debunked. Here at Bowood House, Priestley was experimenting by focusing the sun's rays through a lens onto a solution of liquid. What happened next would change our understanding of the elements forever.
So there we go. That's a scene from Monkford and Seagull's Genius Adventures. If you missed it, it's on iPlayer. And on Monday, the final episode is being repeated on BBC Two at 7:30 in the morning. So the reason I picked this particular sketch was, historically they'd believe there were 4 elements: earth, water, air, and fire. But in the period of the late 1700s, they proved actually there were elements, there were atoms, different things made up our universe essentially, rather than just 4 things. And I think this relates a bit to our historical understanding of people. Of course, when we will try and judge people based on our modern day standards. Of course, there are certain things such as racism, for example, that we shouldn't accept. But as a historian, you also need to consider the circumstances that people are in if you're trying to judge people. Because, of course, standards always change. What's acceptable now in 2020, in 2030, 2040, we may look back and go, those people in the 2020, they really didn't think correctly. So, of course, it's always a very difficult act of history because you've got to judge them partly based on their context, but understanding actually maybe things will be done differently today. Okay. So, thank you. It's been a great class. So let's have a look. What else is coming up with Mr. Seagull? So Saturday, honestly, I'm so sweaty. I don't know if this top is cotton thick. It's for you. I'm gonna have to wash this out. But on Saturday, I think it's gonna be another warm day. But come along 8 o'clock after you've had a great day. Join me for my family quiz. And again, normal classes next week. It seems to be Mondays. I've got lots of meetings all the time. And on Monday at 7 o'clock, and again, I'll post this on my Facebook, I'll post this on my Twitter and Instagram. At 7 o'clock on Monday, I'm doing a Q&A session with something called TEDx. So TEDx is a place where you do public speeches. And I did a speech back in January for Kingston about mathematics, why maths is fun. And again, if you've not seen it, go and type in Bobby Seagull TEDx on YouTube and you'll find the talk. It's about a 16-minute talk. And often a lot of people that are public speakers or have an issue that they want to talk about will use TEDx as a platform. So Monday at 7 o'clock, I'm talking with the TEDx organisers about how I did it, why I did it, and sort of the things that I want to do afterwards. So join me on Monday at 7 o'clock after as well. Okay. If you are part of a primary school, or if you know anyone in a primary school, or even secondary school, I'd love it if you can tell your teachers to get involved, because I'm going to keep going. I'm not sure when I'm going to stop. I know school's going on. My school, officially, we've got another 3-4 weeks left. So I'd love it. Thank you so much. If you can tell your primary school. So tell your friends, tell other members of your family, tell your primary school, maybe your head teacher. They can get involved. And again, we can give you shout outs as well. Okay. I think it's time for our dance now. So thank you so much. So today's lesson, we looked at Churchill. We looked at how he grew up, how he struggled at school a bit, but He found his niche in World War II, where when he became the Prime Minister. Niche is a bit of an understatement. He was an inspirational figure, but also we've understood that historical figures can be complex and they've got flaws, and no one's perfect, and Churchill wasn't, but we should still acknowledge the importance of this person for our war efforts. Okay, so thank you Sarah, thank you Mayuri, thank you Oscar, thank you Martha, thank you Karina, thank you Lisa, thank you Hayden, and we're going to end up with a dance. Thank you Sue, thank you all for joining again. Let's spread the word, get more people joining along with Mr. Seagull's classes. I'm not sure where we're going on Tuesday. I think possibly Ireland. Possibly, I'm due on Ireland. I know that someone requested Ireland and Slovakia very soon. So are you ready? Oh my God. If you were here, look, I'm absolutely drenched. But let's get this done. Joe Wicks, eat your heart out. We're going to be doing Dance with Bobby. No, to be honest, Joe would love this as well. So thank you so much everyone for joining in. Really appreciate it. So, last dance. Here we go. Look at that dance though. So remember, I said the 30s and 40s they had jive, jitterbug, swing, lots of exciting dance, lots of energy. Well, thank you so much for joining me. And what I'll do is, I'll very quickly, if I can find it, I'll try and find a link to my TEDx talk. If you wanted to watch it, here we go. There we go. Okay. So see you all next week on Tuesday. Thank you so much for taking part. It's been a pleasure today. Here we go. See you all very soon.